Sun's coming up in about 15 minutes' time. We'll go back down again at 25 past 5 this evening. This is BBC Radio Merseyside. It's ticking around to 8 minutes past 7 this Tuesday morning. Now, ID cards invaluable in the war against crime and useful for identification, or an infringement on our civil liberties and a step too far by a big brother state? Well, that's the question we're asking here on Breakfast as the government's controversial scheme goes live today in Liverpool. From this morning, you'll be able to apply for one. It's not free. It's going to cost you 30 quid. In the studio with me is Neil Norman. He's an expert in biometrics and CEO at Human Recognition Systems in Wavertree. Neil, good morning to you. Thanks for coming in.
Morning.
This sounds the stuff of Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger, this kind of stuff. Is it really that kind of Star Trek-y science fiction we're into now?
I think to many people it probably is, because they haven't really come across it that often. But the reality is that it's been out there for some time now. As is always the case when technology first comes out, it's in a very raw state. It's now starting to fall into sort of applications and deliver some real-world value.
Yeah, I mean, how advanced is the technology that the government are using at the moment? Because, you know, what we think is security to get into our own laptops at home is totally different to the kind of security that the governments use, I should imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, I think there's a bit of forgive the pun, but a bit of an identity crisis about this whole identity card thing.
Yeah.
The government's trying to use biometrics for a whole host of different products and services. It's not just about the identity cards. And let's face it, I think we'd all place a bet on it being removed off the agenda in the next few months. It's all about things like we need to positively identify people, and the number one thing the government's focused on is protecting the borders.
Yeah.
So issues such as like issuing visas. Recently, you'll have seen there was a massive fraud going on in India and Pakistan, where there was an over-application, and so they need some means of being able to positively identify people. So as part of the visa application process, they will gather people's biometric data to make sure the person coming in is the person that applied for it.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand it, biometrics is the only way of positively identifying somebody in that way. So they're using it for a whole host of different ways.
Are they a necessary part of our life in 2010, would you say? I mean, have you got one, for example?
I do have an application on my desk, actually, at the moment.
Are you going to get one?
Personally, I think the identity cards itself, I think the government hasn't really done a good job in selling it and what it's for. I think one of the key selling points, I think they launched it in a nightclub saying that it was good for checking your age. Well, hopefully I wouldn't be asked for my age these days. For me, what the government's trying to actually do with these, they call it the National Identity Scheme. I just want to be clear on something. The identity cards is probably 10% of the whole National Identity Scheme. The National Identity Scheme is like the core identity database or infrastructure which is being used for other more positive things, such as protecting the borders, such as visa applications, etc.
But we're a cynical lot, really, aren't we? You know, we do get a bit twitchy, and we do get a bit dubious about, you know, and I watch Spooks, and everybody else watches Spooks, you know, so we do get a bit twitchy about them. Why do you think that is?
Isn't it called change? Whenever
is it called suspicion, or is it called change?
I think one of the things I do want to be clear on, you know, my role is all around the technology, and making sure that it's applied efficially and ethically. You know, we do take that seriously in the business. However, I think what other protagonists are interested in are policy and how it's used. One thing that's not going to happen, you're not going to put the technology back in the box. It's out now.
Okay.
But the policy is the thing that's going to drive it. And I understand, you know, first and foremost, I am a citizen of the United Kingdom. So I was interested in what sort of information they're going to be holding against myself as well.
Okay. All right. Well, listening to that is Anita Coles, who's a policy officer at Liberty. Hopefully you got all that, Anita?
Yes, I did.
Hey, I watch Spooks. I think you do as well. I mean, do I need to be worried about identity cards?
Well, I think that the real issue is not so much the technology and issues like that, but what, as your previous guest was saying, is about the policy behind it. This government has not had a great history of making sure our data is kept securely. Even if you have technology that works massively well, you can't guarantee that every public servant that has access to this information is going to use it appropriately. And what we're concerned about with the ID card scheme, it's not the card itself, it's the National Identity Register, which is a massive database that sits behind it, which is going to hold up to 50 pieces of information about a person. and there's real questions about who has access to that and what type of information is being stored. And I think people are becoming increasingly concerned about this.
Well, there's 100 people, according to the government, who will have access on that. They would be threatened with jail if the system is abused in any way. But we do hear stories about pen drives with information being left on trains, or laptops being left on trains with very sensitive information on there. Is that the main reason that we're a bit twitchy about this, the use of that information? Or is there something more sinister behind it, would you say?
Well, I think that, as you say, the government hasn't had a massive good track record of storing our information. So I think we're right to be sceptical about this. But it also, I think with ID cards, it's a question that we really need to look at, about the changing relationship between the state and the individual. Like, does the state really need to have this much information about us? Obviously, it needs to have a certain amount of information, but why keep it all in one spot where, you know, enormous amounts of people are going to be having access to it over time? The other thing that they fail to mention is that they can allow more people to have access to it when the minister makes an order to that effect. And so this can only be expanded. The last time we had ID cards was World War II, and when it was first introduced, it was to be used for 3 purposes only, and by the time it was scrapped, it had mushroomed to about 39 different purposes. So the problem with these ideas is when they first start, they start for one thing, and then they just go on. And I think we really need to start to question about why the government actually needs this information held on us.
I'm a family man, and, you know, there will be a lot of people listening who would like to just have a nice, secure nation for themselves and for their children. You've got to really take that into account. If this is a way that we can do this, surely that's not a bad thing, is it, Anita?
Well, if that was to be true, then that would certainly be one reason.
Why wouldn't it be true?
There's no evidence whatsoever. When these were introduced, the government first tried to spin it on the basis that it would help with the fight against terrorism, it would help with the fight against illegal immigration. But I think they've now backtracked on that because it's become increasingly clear that that is not true.
So why do you think, if that's not true, why do you think the government want this information on us? I mean, they can track us from a mobile phone if they want to. They can track us from using a cash point card. I've got 9 forms of identification in my wallet right now, from a credit card to a debit card to a Costco card to a loyalty card for a supermarket. So really, you know, if they wanted to find me, I mean, they're going to find me, you know, within a matter of hours, I should imagine.
Well, yes, but obviously that would take a few steps and processes along the way, whereas if you have all the information in one spot, it becomes easier. I mean, I don't actually think there's any particular sinister reason per se. I think they just feel that it might become easier. But the problem is, where does this lead us to?
But you still haven't told me where you think it's going to lead us to. I'm not clear on where you actually think it's going to lead us to. Is it going to be a George Orwell 1984 situation?
No, obviously. I mean, we wouldn't go that far.
But you haven't said where it's going to lead us to.
It will lead to data losses. People's information will be accessed inappropriately, sure. As soon as there's a mass amount of information held in one spot, there's always going to be issues about that. It's going to lead to potential abilities where somebody in the public authority who has access to it can improperly access that information for improper purposes. So you could imagine situations where a police officer who has access to the information wants to find out what a certain person has been up to, like their ex-wife or something like that. Hopefully this is not going to happen, but the problem is, if once you put in place the ability for it to do so, you lose all control of it. So
but surely you would have to log onto a system and put your own identification in before you access the information, and if you're using it inappropriately, you go to jail.
Well, one would hope, but we've seen so many cases where information is accessed inappropriately all the time, and as you say, left on trains. Nothing is 100% secure, and so why have this massive database that has all this information when it's completely unnecessary? There's absolutely no point to it, and it costs millions and millions, billions of pounds.
All right, Anita. We're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time, but thanks for joining us on... I take it you're not going to get one then?
No, I don't.
I didn't think you would. No, Anita, thanks very much indeed. There's Anita Coles, excuse me, there from she's a policy officer from Liberty. Last point from you, Neil. You said the technology is out of the box now. Is this something that we're just going to have to get used to, and carrying an identity card like so many other different countries, particularly the United States, is something that will just be the norm?
I think it will very quickly become accepted. I think, for example, if you travel into the United States now, you're already providing biometric information. But just a couple of points that I do want to make about this database state.
Okay, very briefly.
You and I already exist on a whole host of different databases. It's better that it be something driven and owned by policy centrally than it be something that is sold miscellaneous in the commercial space. So
yeah, okay. And just thinking back to the story of the lad who hacked into the Pentagon military computer not too long ago and is about to be extradited to the United States. So no system is foolproof, is it?
Well, technology is changing all the time and it's getting better all the time.
Okay, politicians' answer there, well done. It's 18 minutes past 7. A very good morning to you, Greg. Thank you.